Welcome to Make Life Interesting. My name is Tracy Tooley. I'm the lead pastor of Regeneration Church in Huntington, West Virginia. And I just want to start things out today by saying thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. This podcast really wouldn't exist without you listening, without you sending questions and comments, and without you taking parts. And just thank you so much. And hey, if you can think of it, don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and maybe even Spotify. Give us 5 stars if you think it warrants 5 stars. But do that for us because it helps us as we generate more of these and as we make these available. I would love to have your feedback. Would love for you to comment, leave a review, and especially would love to hear directly from you. We have a Facebook page for Make Life Interesting, the podcast, and you can just search us and find it, and we'd love to interact with you there. Today is more of an interview kind of style. I'm having a talk with one of my best friends, especially one of my best ministry friends, Jeff Patrick, who is the lead pastor at Rio Christian Church in Rio Grande, Ohio. He is going to be on with me today, and we're going to talk about how we met, how we've done ministry together, ministry philosophy, just some of the things that we think about concerning discipleship, how he was a integral part of Regeneration getting started. I'm excited for you to be able to catch it. And so we're going to jump right into it. We're going to jump from my home office to the table that I preach from at Regeneration. And Jeff and I are going to spend some time talking, and I'm excited that you get to join us. So me and Jeff, we're going to make life interesting as we share our hearts together. What I wanted to do is I wanted to just kind of talk and have you share your story a little bit, get into ministry stuff and how, we worked together in starting Regen. Yeah. And before we do that, though, how did you become a Christian? Where'd you grow up, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I grew up in Gallia County most of my life from second grade on. We lived there in Gallia County, Ohio, southeastern Ohio, and didn't grow up in the church. Didn't really know much about the church at all. And I guess I started attending a little bit. My dad and mom started going to church in the late 70s, which would have been my senior year, 79. So I went a little bit because they were going. And just kind of hung around on and off from the late 70s all the way until, like I said, around 92. Yeah, around 1992. When I finally allowed the Lord to speak into my life enough that I made the move to become a follower of Jesus. And it's one of those things where early in life, like a lot of people, I was kind of wild, and then got out of a lot of that stuff. When Barb and I got married, got out of a lot of that stuff and really really never changed.
Yeah.
I was still the same person, even though I wasn't doing all the external things. Mm-hmm. And finally, the Lord got my attention to the point where I knew that I could not continue to live as the person I was. Mm. And so I gave my life to the Lord, and when I did, I really did. I went in, I jumped full in, and been there ever since. Yeah. God's blessed us and blessed my family.
That's awesome. Now, music's always been a part of your life. Now, if you have maybe thought as you were listening to this as we started, Jeff's got a radio voice, and not necessarily, I don't, but Jeff does. You did radio stuff and did DJ stuff and all that.
Yeah, I used to. I did radio for a few years. Was a morning drive. That means I was on from 6 in the morning to 10 in the morning, and I did a morning drive jock spot. And I also did spun records. Actually, back when we spun records at some clubs and stuff like that. So that was a long time ago. Especially when you think where it's actually spinning 45s.
Yeah. So. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Now, did you and Barb meet when you were doing that?
Yeah, we met. I met actually at one of the clubs that we were at. Me and another guy from the radio station were there every weekend, spinning records at this club, and she was working for a local pharmacy there, and they were going to have their Christmas party, and it was going to be on a Sunday, and it was going to be at the club. They had rented the club out for that Sunday, and they actually hired us to spin records for their party, and that's how we met. So
that's awesome. You spinning your 45s,
yeah.
And so you came to the Lord and kind of all in.
Yeah.
How did you from there get into ministry?
Well, right off the bat, when I first started, I hadn't even been a Christian very long, and they came to me, and that's back in the old days when you had Sunday school superintendents and all that fun stuff. We don't have that anymore, most places anyway. And they asked me to be Sunday school superintendent. I'm like, well, sure, I'll do that. And here's how naive I was. So they put me in there, and then they came to me one day and said something about, have you ordered curriculum for the next quarter? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you got to order this curriculum so the teachers have something to teach out of. And I'm like, you mean they don't use the Bible?
Even back then,
yeah,
you were the same way.
Yeah, and I'm like, I had no concept that these people were teaching out of another book, but they just threw me right in, and from that time on, next thing I knew, I was a deacon, and then we had a student minister that was there that left, and we were between student ministers, and I had been volunteering, helping and stuff, and I just kind of took over, on a volunteer basis. I was running student ministry along with the help of some friends that were there, and I told my wife one day, I said, I really think that I think the Lord's called me to step into this position. And she wanted to slap me, but I was working at a surveying and engineering company. I was the crew chief. I was the office manager in charge of hiring and firing, and I was bidder estimator. I was doing all that stuff. I had a company vehicle, I had a company credit card, and all she could see was, what are we going to do when all that's gone? And my boss was a great boss, and he allowed me to use the company vehicle as a personal vehicle, so we didn't have to own another car. And so it was, and it bothered me to distraction, and I thought that was what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And I went to the senior minister and I said, listen, I think the Lord's called me into this. And he said, well, we'll set up a meeting. And they set up a meeting with the leadership team, and next thing you knew,
you were ordering curriculum.
Next thing you knew, I was in student ministry then, man. And so I just took off, we just took off from there.
And that's kind of how we got to know each other, because you were doing the church you were at. They did a weekend thing every year called Youth Attack.
Yes.
And so that's how we eventually got to know you, was by
we just
there.
Yeah, and I just you were a part of what was going on in the local area with the youth, and we had you come in, you and Wendy both come in a few times, and we had you from doing everything from leading worship to doing little drama stuff to and we just kind of you and I just kind of got together and stayed together all these years.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny. What does your wife call me?
She calls you my ministry wife.
Yeah. Yes, we've been together now 29 years. And it's been a successful marriage. That makes me laugh so hard. She just come out of the blue one day and just called me that, and it's kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So
you're the one that goes when we go places. You're the one that's ironing your clothes. It ain't me. So.
Well, I'm not ironing your clothes.
No, that's true.
So, but we do bicker like a married couple. We loved Youth Attack, and that you guys did that for how many years?
Probably. Well, they were doing it before I took over. So I bet I did between 8 and 10 years they would do that. And I mean, there was, we'd have 300 to 350 teenagers.
Oh,
there.
yeah, I can remember the church that where you did it. I mean, it was full.
Yeah.
Like every year that you did it, and it was pretty amazing. And the church that you were involved in for the time, I would say, was pretty progressive in doing something like that.
Yeah.
Because not a lot of churches were.
Yeah, because we would bring in, not just you guys, but we'd bring in worship bands that were more rock oriented. And back in that day, especially in our area, that was people that would freak some people out.
Oh yeah.
We actually had student ministers that were there with their kids that were like, well, I'm not real sure about this, because that was back in the day when that just wasn't happening around our area.
To give you an idea, your church had a pretty successful clown ministry kind of thing, and so that was progressive.
Yeah.
For that church. And so when you started doing the youth attack at the level that you were doing it with the worship bands and stuff, it was pretty, and I can remember, I mean, it's so weird thinking in the 90s that was controversial.
Yeah.
You know, because it seems like Christian rock had, in the 80s, had kind of, when you get into the 90s, had kind of gotten past the controversial stuff, but it's still, even then, and it's still there to a certain point.
To a certain way. Yeah, with certain people, you know, it still is out there. I'm grateful that, you know, where I'm at now, we don't have any of those issues with that sort of stuff. We got issues, but that isn't one of them.
Yeah.
So
now, how did you were at the church where you were at in Gallia County, and now you're at Rio.
Yeah, Rio
Christian Church. Yeah. How did you get from the church where you were serving with student ministry, and how'd you get to Rio?
Well, it got to the point where. You know, where I was at in Gallipolis, the senior there, Denny, he did a lot of travel. So he was gone a lot of Sundays. And I was filling in a lot on Sunday mornings and Sunday nights. And, you know, I was, you know, standing on the stage and was the guy doing a lot of the preaching a lot of the time. And people just started encouraging me that, you know, you're really gifted at this. And it got to the point, too, where, you know, I just felt like, okay, maybe that's something I need to think about. And the more I thought about it, the more it was just, you could just see that God was opening doors here and there. So I told leadership, I told the congregation that I was getting ready to go ahead and start looking for a senior position. And I sent out, I think, 7 resumes, and I was within 3 or 4 months, I was offered 3 or 4 jobs, and didn't take any of them.
Were they local?
No. Everywhere from Kentucky to Indiana to way over in West Virginia. Like, you have to go to Maryland and make a right. And so, but there was several, you know, had opportunities to go, and it just never did feel like there was a fit. And where I'm at now, Rio Christian was building a new facility. They didn't have a preacher. They didn't have any leadership. And they needed some drywall work done. Well, I'd done drywall in the past. And one of the guys there that was just preaching there, it was just a fill-in guy, just to have somebody there that was preaching, called me one day. And he said, I understand you do some drywall. I'd never met him before. I said, yeah. And he said, well, we was wondering if you could come out and look at our building. He said, we've been doing some of it, but he says it's just too much. You can't. So I went out there, and, you know, we went out, and I told him, yeah, I'd do it. And I didn't charge him or anything. I just went out to help the church and did the drywall for him. And my brother came and helped a little bit, helped me texture the ceilings and stuff in some of the other rooms, some of the classrooms and stuff. And wasn't too long after that, Bill called me again. He's like, he said, I understand that you're looking to take a senior position. I said, yeah. And he said, well, we believe that we're ready to hire somebody. He said, I'd love for you to come talk to us. So I went out and talked to them. They didn't have, like I said, they didn't have a leadership. They didn't have like leadership. They had like a steering committee sort of. So I went out and sat and talked with them, and took the job. And that's where I've been now. Just as a matter of fact, just this past, actually this week, 21 years. I've been there 21 years this week.
That's amazing.
So, you know, and Bill told me later that when I came and did the drywall, he said, in the back of my mind, I was thinking then, this guy right here might be the guy for us. And I mean, it's been a, you know, we've had our ups and downs since I've been there, but the people have always been great. Smaller congregation, so we've had financial concerns on and off, but the people have just been great. They've taken Barb and I right in and just made us a part of that family, and so we've always been, been blessed to be there.
Thank God for Barb.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also like, man, the way you do drywall, we think you could be our preacher.
We think you could be our preacher. Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So, tell me, like, you became a Christian and really didn't have any church experience at all, none of that. How has that affected how you do ministry?
Well, I believe that it's affected it a lot because I don't, from where I was to where I am, when I look at people, I see them as I was. Mm-hmm. And that's the people that I seek to connect with. That's the people that I try to connect with. It doesn't always work, but those are the type of people, and I can, and I don't, I know that every person that I come into contact with is made in the image of God, regardless of who they are, what they've done, where they've been. And I know that God, was patient with me. And as a follower of Christ, that just happens to be a pastor, I have to be patient with people, because he was patient with me. And I have to remember that how long it took me. So a lot of what the way I approach people, and the way that I talk to people, the way that I act and react around people, a lot of that is based on the fact that of all of us, according to our experiences of life, that affects how I talk, how I do that with people. I'm not saying that my way is right and somebody else's is wrong, but because of how I grew up, because of my lack of knowledge about the church, I know with a lot of people, when they walk in or when I talk to them about stuff, they have no idea what I'm talking about, just like I had no idea what people were talking about.
Yeah. It's the kind of reflected in Ephesians 2 where it says, that's talking to Christians, that's who you used to be.
That's who you used to be.
And Paul, he was always good at reminding the church of that, of, don't forget, this is where you were, this is who you used to be.
Yep.
And that, I mean, I'm the same way. I think it has to frame how you look at the people around you.
Yeah.
And when you do that, I think it helps you empathize more with them instead of us against them.
Yeah, it's not us against them. It's this concept that it's us against them. It's not. Scripture's clear what our battle is against, and it's not people. And oftentimes, and you and I have talked about this. When we look at people, you can't expect people who are not followers of Jesus to act like followers of Jesus. Mm-hmm. We're not called to be that. We're called to hold one another accountable within the body of Christ, and to allow other people that are not yet followers to see what a follower looks like. When we don't do that, and when we're just out pointing fingers at somebody, they don't want any part of that. That just why would I want that? Why do I don't need that. No, we're supposed to love and obey Scripture and live our lives according to what God has in store for us. And through that, Jesus will draw them to himself. And if he draws them, they have the opportunity to either accept or reject. And that's where we are. And that's how I do ministry. Yeah.
It's rather ironic that we want people who aren't Christians to act like Christians, and sometimes we in the church don't act
like Christians. Yeah, I mean that's the same thing Jesus got on the Pharisees about. You want them to do something that you won't even do yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So
interesting. Yeah, and it's getting to know your church. Well, first of all, you said that looking at everybody as they've been created in the image of God. That's your tattoo.
Oh yeah,
you have your tattoo, and there it is. Yeah, see
Imago Dei.
Yep. And that's pretty awesome that you have it, so it reminds you of that.
It always reminds me that when I see somebody, I reach out to shake somebody's hand, I see it. And it reminds me, this person that I'm shaking hands with or this person that I'm talking to, they're all made in the image of God, and I need to treat them as such.
That's great. That's awesome. And knowing your church, the kind of the attitude, the DNA of your church has a lot of that in it.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of that comes from you. I mean, you hear all the time that people say, the personality of your church a lot of times takes on the personality of the person who's preaching.
Yeah, a lot of times what you get on the stage is what you'll see, and good or bad.
No sarcasm at all or anything.
But but it is, I do well. Just like this morning, we got a text group that reads one chapter of scripture a day, and so some of them are from God. It's all men. And some of them are from Rio, but we also have people from Texas that are in it, and Michigan that are in it, and different places, South Carolina, that are all a part of it. And today we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, where it talks about all the body of Christ, and the hand and the foot and the ear, and how important. And one of our guys from Rio said, our congregation's good at this. Mm. We know what our roles are. And he was just talking about how blessed it is to be a part of a congregation that all works together as one body, moving in one direction. And that's what we strive for. If Jesus is the head, and we're all moving in the same direction that he's moving, we're going to get some stuff accomplished. But if we all start straggling around, we're not going to accomplish very much.
Yeah. Have you ever? Because I know for me, it's sometimes been a struggle, and especially getting into the church planting world. Mm-hmm. Has it ever been a struggle for you with having a small church and it not getting huge?
I talked about this a while back. Bill Dummett and I did a video thing similar to this, but it was a podcast. It was just a video thing where we sat and talked. And when I first went to Rio Grande years ago, my vision was like most guys' vision. Mm-hmm. Numerically, we're going to grow. We're going to outgrow this facility. We're going to move, and through the numerical growth, we're going to be able to accomplish these things. Mm-hmm. But God, the Lord, really has taught me over the years, it's not about that. And all the things that I hope to accomplish, we accomplished and are still accomplishing without the numerical growth. He just used it. You bring people, you grow people up to become mature Christians, and it is amazing what God can do. Mm-hmm. So early on, I'd get frustrated, but that doesn't bother me in the least now. I'm not about numbers. Like I used to be. I was at one time, but I'm not that way anymore. I see when I'm standing up on the stage and I'm preaching and I look out, I can look at this couple and I can look at that couple and I can think where they were 5 years ago, and I see how they've matured in Christ over the years, and over those 5 years, and how far they've grown, and how different they are in their job and that sort of stuff. That's where growth is, and it's not always about numbers. Yeah. Although, I'm not saying we wouldn't like to have more numbers. Sure, I think right. every church, every congregation mm-hmm. would like to have more numbers, and not saying that we're against that, but that's not what we're about.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy because that's one of the easiest things to measure. Yeah. So you measure and you say, well, my church is 300 people. A lot of people say because it's easy to measure, there's more success there.
There's more success there, yeah.
But that's not always. Yeah,
that's not always an indication of how many disciples you're making.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how many people you're putting in seats. Mm-hmm. Some people do a really good job at having big numbers and also being able to make disciples in smaller setting. Mm-hmm. Well, we just happen to have a smaller setting. Yeah. And we're just doing what a bigger church would do in a smaller setting in one setting.
Yeah, we went on one of our married couple retreats when we went to River Tree. Yeah. River Tree Christian Church up outside of Canton. And we went to that missional community elective thing. Yeah. And one of the things they talked about in one of the sessions was how you really need to try to stay away from the the lure of butts, bucks, and baptisms.
Yeah.
And how a lot of times, unfortunately, churches look at them in that order.
Yeah.
Instead of baptisms being like the thing that you kind of measure, you're always measuring how many are there and how much money you're taking in. And then, we have baptized some people.
Yeah.
And that's always stood out to me of how, it's just so easy to the numerically. And I mean, you see churches that have huge buildings. And I mean, we were talking a little bit about that this morning before we started, about how you look at a building and you see something huge and you must think, well, that church is really successful. And well, yeah, maybe. And so we've been in this relationship for a long time. Talk about how involved you were with Regeneration coming into being.
You can't blame that on me. Listen, we started. There's a group of us got together and we started this little, like a church plant organization called New Churches for the Kingdom, and there was several of us on it. You were on the board with me.
That was.
And
no ulterior motives.
No ulterior motives.
And this was, and we're talking, this was 2011.
Yeah.
Right around that time.
Yeah. And we, we talked about the need to plant a church, and originally we were talking about Proctorville area,
mm-hmm.
and we got some money in the bank, and that sort of stuff, and thought, well, maybe it's time. And when we talked about who was going to be the planter, some of us got behind your back and said, Tracy and Wendy.
They had meetings without one of the board directors there.
Tracy and Wendy. And so, we just, we asked you guys, and you guys went, and then, of course, we got tied in with Stadia. Actually, New Churches for the Kingdom. But we went up to, what was the group?
I was trying to think about that the other day. It was a network of churches in Ohio.
Yeah, making it hard to go to hell in Ohio is what
that's their
motto.
That was their motto.
But I can't remember what they were called.
Greg Nettle. Yeah. He was at River Tree at the time.
Yeah, he was at River Tree at the time.
And so he put together this network, and we met at Worthington Christian Church once a month, and we got connected there because at the time it was going to be in Ohio.
Yeah.
And Russ had heard about this network.
Yeah.
And so that's how we got going to that.
Yeah.
And then Stadia was there. Bob Harrington at the time.
Was a part of it. Yeah.
And
so we just kind of got tied in with them. And you and Wendy decided it was, kind of something you wanted to do. And then you had to go through
assessment.
Yeah. It was down at Johnson.
Yeah.
And I went down. I was actually your assessor.
You were.
I was one of your assessors.
You assessed us.
Yes. And
I had both my wives, or my wife and my husband there on the trip. Yeah. And it was interesting because we were at Gateway Christian Church
mm-hmm.
in St. Albans, and we were there for 8 years. I was on staff there, and about halfway through our time there, I'm talking 2007, is when I began to feel. I had great ministry there, but just began to feel a little bit restless, like there was something more. And whenever I would see things or read things about just working with people, and I don't want this to sound like it's going to sound, but when I would read about working with people who didn't know Jesus,
mm-hmm.
I would always get excited. Not that we didn't do that at Gateway, but a lot of times if you work at a bigger church, sometimes if you're not more intentional,
you'll get pigeonholed into what you're doing.
And a lot of times you get wrapped up in taking care of those who are already Christ followers.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but you've got to be really intentional. And so I would just get that longing when I would read about stuff like that. And then one thing led to another with New Churches for the Kingdom. And so, we went to Johnson Bible College for the assessment. You were there. And just one thing led to another. And then Stadia came on board. And we began the church and started it from scratch. You were on the management team.
I was chair.
You were the chair.
I was the chair of the management team for a long time. So, until you guys got leadership, and all that sort of stuff.
About 3 years, something like that. So there was you and Russ and Larry Marshall.
Yeah, Larry Marshall was on that.
And Mark Tompkin. From Gateway, and I think and then you and myself. And so. And it was an interesting process just of everything we went to and everything we were involved with that. And it was just, and being involved in starting Regen. One of those things that I think all the time is just it never even came to mind back in 93 when we met. Mm-hmm. We were in two different kind of situations back in 93. Did we ever realize that 18 years later, that we would be involved in something like that?
Yeah. It's amazing how, that you look back on that and how, God moved through what was going on and the direction, where He led us, and the next thing you know, we're working together to plant a church here in Huntington, and like we said, it originally looked at Proctorville, and then it ended up here, and it's a good thing to me that that this is where you guys ended up. I mean, you're close to Marshall campus, and some of the stuff that's happened here would have never been able probably to. It would have been different. It would have been different.
Very much so. And it was one of those things when Stadia got involved. They were a lot of help of helping us make the transition from there to here because everybody comes to Huntington. Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. That was part of their philosophy of we could do it there because there were a lot of people that moving across the river. Yeah. And those of you who are listening who may not be familiar with where we are, if you look at the state of Ohio, where Huntington is pretty much right at the most southern tip of the state of Ohio, right across the river. And we're kind of where Huntington is where Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky meet. And so in a lot of ways, it made sense because people came here. Yeah. And a lot of it, I think a lot of what has helped our relationship is just we have a lot of same ministry philosophy.
Sure we do. And I don't know if that's because we've hung out together so long that we started thinking alike. Or
well, you hear that married couples start thinking alike.
But we do have similar thoughts about ministry, ideas about how not just ministry, but how you and I should walk as followers of Jesus. We have a similar concept on that scripturally, how we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to walk, and hopefully in my life as a follower of Jesus, what happens on stage or what happens in ministry when I go to talk to somebody what happens there should be an overflow of who I am as a follower of Jesus. It's not something that I'm just this is my philosophy of how I act when I'm in a hospital room, or this is my philosophy of how I act when I'm doing a wedding. This is who I am. God has called me into ministry to reach out, to encourage people to stop focusing on the temporary and focus on the eternal.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being willing. Well, we need to make this not the only one, but we need to plan on doing another one again because Jeff and I have this habit. I don't know how it came to be. I think you started it, but if we call each other and can't get each other, we'll leave voicemail and we'll just sing a song to each other.
Just sing a song. I delete those really quick. I'm a better singer than you.
Okay, but I keep yours just because they make me laugh so much. Do one.
Don't pull your love out on me, baby. If you do, then I think maybe I'll just lay me down. Cry for 100 years.
See, that right there, isn't that enough to just
anybody that's around you or me very long knows pretty much what you see is what you're going to get.
Yeah, very much so. Mary, well, I appreciate you, and we'll do it again. You guys, thank you. And if you have any comments, please don't hesitate. You can go to the Make Life Interesting Facebook page. We've got a page for the podcast. You can email me, Tracy, at regenerationwv.com. But thank you so much for being with us, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you, man. Love you guys. We'll see you soon.